This is the first Summer 18 show to feel like a capital A anime, the type I expect to see on Toonami next year unless it turns out especially bad. It's by PA Works, but in every way feels like Studio Bones made it, probably because director Ando Masahiro's been bouncing between the two studios for a decade. Anything he touches features pretty serious action choreography, though nothing here impressed me as much as even the action in Shirayuki Hime, not to say that none was effective. More exciting to me, this thing actually has themes! There's vampires who see themselves as evolutionary underdogs on a mission to reshape the world to their needs. The good guys are an authoritative group regarding vampires as their prey, and our main guy, Sirius, is ideologically pacifistic, seeming to not care for the way that his group does things or generally for how humans treat lesser life forms, but happily slaughtering the vampires because of their flippant treatment of human lives. I'm expecting conflict to arise when a good vampire or an evil government official puts these morals to the test. Also of interest is the group's age dynamic. Instead of 5 pretty boys or moe girls fighting demons, we've got a couple of older gentlemen mixed in, coming off as legitimately more worldly than the younger teammates and perhaps more conniving. This episode teases inner conflict between members, but abates it for the time being. There's also hints of big factions and bosses at play, but for now they hang in the shadows. Before I overpraise this though, a clarification, this episode was boring. No character had enough screen time for me to form a connection. Instead, too much emphasis was placed on a boilerplate establishing action scenario. Last year we got a better version of the same story in a more creative version of the same setting with better action to boot from Princess Principal. Calling Tenrou Toonami fodder is by no means a compliment. It's a show I'd glance at while it's on and never bother to watch. A palpable sense of trying to create serious, high-effort anime pervades it, but the seams are visible, from ugly blood effects to just okay background art. There's a lot of sound design, but it's not necessarily good. In this scene, it sounds like they put a boom mic in the streets of modern-day New York, while the stuff happening on screen doesn't seem like it should create nearly so much noise. When going up against the vampire lady, the supposed good guys let her murder a shitload of cops and don't even seem to care. We don't learn enough about their allegiances to necessarily say this is out of character, but considering their mission seems to be efficiently slaughtering vampires in defense of humanity, it's weird that none of them is even upset with themselves for allowing so many casualties. All in all, I'm not expecting this to be an amazing story or a particularly impressive production, but like everything else Masahiro Ando does, I can hope for a solidly watchable 7 out of 10 with some cool action scenes. Here's hoping it doesn't totally go to shit the moment we learn about the characters. What does it say about me that the only reason I didn't drop this is because of all the male nudity? Here's a show about a college diving club with some hot 20-something girls and tons of muscly naked bros. They never actually get around to diving in the first episode though. Mostly it's a bunch of the same joke about how the main character tries to resist the dude bro life but slowly gives in, to the detriment of getting to swoon his sexy cousin because now she thinks he's a pig. I mentally checked out about halfway through this episode, but I feel like a lot of you would honestly love this and I don't hate it, so for once I'm just gonna ask of you, if this sounds like something you'd enjoy, go watch the episode before you vote on whether I should continue it or not.
Are we human? Or are we dancer?
This looks and feels pretty nice, but I'm not sure what the hell it even is yet. For the first 15 minutes I was bored as all hell watching the Ongaku Shoujo OVA yet again. Or is it Symphogear? Either way, I was never a fan. Then it straight up unambiguously turned into Star Driver. I bet I could mix footage of the two and you wouldn't even be able to tell which was which, but I'm not gonna bother because that sounds like effort. There's a great thread on Twitter explaining the series' background and how the whole thing is based on Takarazuka theater and the creator's desires for change therein, but like, it still doesn't really explain what the hell the show is. What I do know is that they showed that fucking picture of the two girls like 7 fucking times, and by the second time it already felt forced and excessive, and that was how everything came off to me. The music during the part where the girls are just simply introducing themselves sounds like a battle theme from Land of the Lustrous, and after I posted this on IGTV I found out it was the same composer. And every girl has so much energy and smiles that they barely seem human. Is this intentional? Will it be subverted? There's just not enough to go on, but I'll be sticking around to figure it out. It'll certainly be worth it if the action choreography and animation can hold a candle to this first episode. Despite my Star Driver comparison, the action in this show is better directed and more densely meaningful by far, so maybe it'll be cool. This show has warmed the cockles of my heart and saved anime this season. It's a straightforward rom-com about young love and early 90s Japanese gaming, which is rapidly ticking the boxes on my 6 things I want from anime romance while generating my biggest laughs of the season. You don't need to know the ins and outs of Street Fighter or the PC Engine to enjoy the show, by the way, though it does help to justify my years of unnecessary research on gaming eras before my time. Even though it's basically a commercial vehicle for peddling classic game collections, I can't say anything negative about this show. Even the ads are entertaining. It's not the deepest or most thought-provoking series even among comedy offerings this season, but it definitely provides the most feels. My friend Ghostlightning once wrote that guilty pleasure should describe the enjoyment of something morally wrong, and that's how I felt watching Happy Sugar Life. I have no guilt over the show being cheesy, edgy, and tonally obnoxious because I don't like those things about it. I'm guilty because I do like the protagonist, insofar as she represents the extreme end of what we all feel towards the wrongs of the world, that desire to skip the conversation and take an axe to assholes. Really though, I was surprised how restrained the first episode's climax was. I expected gleeful yandere bloodlust, but the fact our girl can be fairly reasonable, resolving a situation without violence, is more engaging. Anime has a long tradition of shows about innocent, hardworking children beaten down by the selfish adults around them, and I usually hate them for being too goddamn depressing. But here, our protagonist is not an underdog, but rather so unchained she's basically suppressing her power level to function within society. And it's not her murderousness, but her manipulation which makes her formidable. Ordinarily, I would have dropped a show like this right off the bat, but having the main character presented as not just sexually open, but someone who keeps a revolving door of boyfriends wrapped around her fingers, and also is a lesbian lolicon child kidnapper, was such a bold move I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. I hope this show is worldly enough to give her an interesting backstory and to heavily critique her misconceptions about love and innocence while she inevitably ruins this kid's life and destroys herself. That is, assuming it adheres to the best elements of this episode more strongly than the worst. I'm curious enough to see how it goes. This was a pleasant, out-of-nowhere surprise. It's literally the same concept as the Osomatsu reboot, and very referential of this fact. Even though they did the exact same gimmick, I found this way funnier, perhaps because the focus on one magnetic character was easier to connect with than 6 indistinguishable randos. It also felt like it gave a better sense of not only how the previous show might have been, but also how this one will be going forward. It's raunchy, edgy, over-the-top, fourth-wall non-existent comedy that mostly hit for me by way of pure blunt force trauma. Probably helps that instead of referencing every easy target flavor of the year anime going on at the time like Matsu did, it had cameos of the likeness of a member of X-Japan and goddamn Blackjack, plus Jun Fukuyama flexing his whole range for the sake of an amazing running gag as the dad continually altered his body. Definitely left me curious enough to watch episode 2.
You don't stand a ghost of a chance, Yugi.
This felt like a 2003 character designer-driven harem rom-com displaced in time, right down to the more masculine protagonist and incredibly basic supernatural character settings. Honestly, I don't even mean that as an insult. I'd rather have this than the outright ugly drivel I've been subjected to in shows like Island, but obviously I don't want to watch any more than 8 minutes of it. One of you is going to have to explain to me what's supposed to be good about this show. I guess if you're just excited to see a dark and violent plot-driven series in 2018, then I get that, but this just has me missing the early 90s in the worst way. I've always been a fan of crazy pulp stories, but when I go back to shows with character designs and stories like this from the era this manga ran in, I get tightly crafted thrill rides full of memorable scenes. Banana Fish suffers the same problem I had with Parasite back in 2014. It's so flatly directed and boring to look at that I can't feel its pulse. Every so often it suddenly springs to life with some decent action choreography, but then falls back to this garish mosh of unmatching colors, cheap artwork, and scenes which whiz by weirdly fast with no attempt at tone setting. It had bothered me already, but when episode 3 just kind of brushed the main character getting beaten and raped aside like it was no more dramatic than any other event in the show, and then joked about it, lol what, I realized it would always be this way. The villains are all cliched, mustache-twirling gangsters and comically crooked cops with no subtlety, and as much as I love to see gay representation, it's starting to get weird how not only are there no female characters, but every guy in the show seems to be gay and or a rapist, and also to suffer some form of PTSD. Like, I can tell that's the theme of the show, but so far it hasn't commented on it in any way other than establishing that a bunch of characters have it. Mostly the plot feels like a straightforward sequence of unexciting events, which meters out gradual information about a mystery I couldn't give a fuck about because it's just the words banana fish, which I'm starting to think was chosen less for thematic relevance to the Salinger book and more for innuendo. Please don't fucking make me watch any more of this. I can't take it. I sat through 15 minutes of the two most unlikable characters on planet Earth meandering through a dungeon from Evolution World, spewing vapid, unfunny dialogue about nothing. Oh yeah, this show is based on some RPG Maker indie game. I didn't mention that last time, so about 700 people felt the need to point it out, so here I am now mentioning it. The game frankly looks terrible, but then I played about 20 minutes of IB like 6 years ago and decided this genre probably wasn't for me, and that extends to the anime as well. You don't need me to talk about this. No one will benefit from this interaction. Please let me quit. It's been a while since an anime struck me as awesomely bad, but I was laughing all throughout this chuuni spectacle. Between the hilariously sudden bloodless violence, art and animation so wonky it's almost endearing, hey, at least they actually tried to do it all in 2D, random Shakespeare quotes everywhere, and over-the-top pseudo-apocalyptic setting, there's plenty of chaos to breed unique moments of hilarity. Just watch this shit. What is even going on? There's one part where the main guy says, "I love Shakespeare, but I never wanted to see it twisted like this," and it half convinced me this show was taking the piss. I wanted to say it feels like a 14-year-old wrote it, but then I think the Tales of Symphonia porno fanfics I was writing at that age were more narratively coherent. I don't know if I could actually handle an entire second episode of this, but I'm not gonna lie, I'd be way more excited to have this voted watched than I would Banana Fish.
Hello? What you doing?
Kicking it.
Well, this was basically the exact same thing as episode 1, and I'm already bored with it. And the anime of the week is... Y'all need to stop sleeping on Goku dolls. Not only is it still my favorite of the season, but it's turned out deeper and more interesting than expected by exploring the characters' shockingly well-realized backstories and psyches in ways which might be painfully dark if not for being a comedy. Turns out, using the gimmick of tough guy Yakuza characters who can take both physical and emotional beatings allows the show to go to the extremes of both bleak comedy and social psychology without confusing the tone. Peel back the chuckling facade and you'll find explorations of gender identity and dysphoria, explorations of child psychology, realizations on all sides of what it means to either be or to interact with the opposite sex, and meditations on how authenticity and happiness can bring meaning to a life of coldness and violence. It's, like, really good shit, man, and also the funniest thing on TV that isn't High Score Girl. Don't say I didn't call it. Okay, this is taking way too long once again, so we'll continue in part 2. If you don't feel like waiting an entire week to hear my feelings on shows as they air, then I recommend getting on the IGTV app, where I vlog my write-ups on these shows immediately after writing them, under the name Digibro. Check out my playlist, Patreon, etc. Bye.